Captain had always believed in order. Every morning, she walked the supply depot with her clipboard in hand, checking manifests, counting crates, ensuring every ration, every bullet, and every bandage was exactly where it needed to be. To her, logistics was more than a job, it was a lifeline. Without her meticulous planning, soldiers on the wouldn't survive the chaos that inevitably followed. The desert wind whipped across the valley, carrying with it the faint smell of dust and gunmetal. Paused, squinting at the horizon. The sun had just begun to sink, casting long shadows over the military base. The base itself was sprawling but vulnerable, perched like a fragile jewel in a valley surrounded by jagged ridges. It had looked peaceful this morning. Now something felt off. The radio crackled, breaking the brief calm. All units be advised, enemy forces spotted moving along the eastern ridge. Estimated engagement in... The voice cut off mid-sentence as static swallowed it. Stomach tightened. She wasn't trained for combat, yet suddenly her orderly world felt like it was crumbling. Private, a nervous young soldier with hands that shook when he wasn't holding a rifle, approached her. "Captain, reports say they're advancing faster than expected," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some of the outposts, they've been overrun." Nodded, keeping her expression neutral. Panic would spread faster than gunfire. "Check the ammo supplies," she instructed. "Medical units, get ready for casualties, and make sure the backup generators are online. I want this base fully operational in 15 minutes, regardless of what happens outside these walls." Hesitated. "But Captain, they're heavily armed. Snipers, mortars," his words faltered. He couldn't even finish the sentence. His eyes drifted toward the distant ridge. Through the haze of the dying sun, a dark silhouette moved, still, silent, almost unreal. A lone figure, perched with the patience of a predator. A sniper. Her breath hitched. 1,200 meters away, she couldn't see the details, but she knew the danger instantly. A single well-placed bullet could tear through the compound and end everything she had worked for. Her hand instinctively rested on her sidearm, though she knew it would do little against someone so far away. The wind shifted, carrying faint metallic echoes from the distant ridge. Felt a cold weight settle over her chest, a mix of fear, anticipation, and the adrenaline she had only felt during emergency drills back at Fort. She realized with a sinking clarity that this wasn't a drill. This was real. She moved to the command post, flipping open her laptop and pulling up the latest surveillance feed. Dust swirled in the distance as small enemy movements became visible, creeping closer to the perimeter. Soldiers hurried along the trenches, weapons ready, but even they didn't notice the unseen eyes tracking every move. Clenched her jaw, forcing herself to focus. She had been trained to manage crises, but she had never been trained for an unseen enemy who could kill from a mile away in a single, silent shot. She ran through every contingency she knew, evacuation routes, defensive positions, sniper counters, but nothing felt certain. The radio crackled again, distorted but urgent. "Captain, this is Bravo. We have contact. Multiple hostiles moving through Sector 4. We need..." The message was cut off by a sharp burst of gunfire. Froze, her orderly world of manifests and checklists had shattered in an instant. Outside the perimeter, chaos was unfolding. Somewhere on that ridge, the sniper moved, silent and invisible, a predator that had chosen the moment to strike. Her mind raced. Every decision she had ever made as a logistics officer was about to collide with a reality she had never imagined. And for the first time, felt a dangerous thrill beneath the fear. A cold, sharp clarity. If she wanted anyone to survive, she couldn't just be the organizer of supplies. She had to be more. And in the fading light, as the first echoes of gunfire rolled down the valley, a shadow on the ridge flickered once more. Knew one thing for certain. Tonight, nothing would be ordinary ever again. Suspense Hook, who was watching her from 1,200 meters away, and what did they want the valley had become a trap overnight? What had once been a quiet, sunlit base now throbbed with the pulse of panic. Stood in the command post, her fingers flying across the control panels as she monitored every movement, every static-filled transmission. Supply trucks stalled outside the perimeter, their engines choked with smoke. Soldiers darted between bunkers, carrying ammunition, and whatever cover they could find. The distant sound of gunfire grew louder, punctuated by sharp cracks that echoed off the jagged canyon walls. His chest tightened with each shot. She was trained to stay calm, but adrenaline surged through her like wildfire. This was no ordinary threat. This was precise, deliberate, and terrifyingly patient. "Captain," Private voice trembled over the radio, cutting through the noise. "We've got casualties at Sector 7. They're pinned down." Gritted her teeth. She had faced logistical nightmares before, but this was different. Lives depended on the supplies she had coordinated, yet the enemy didn't care about rations or ammunition. They only cared about chaos. "Reroute medical supplies immediately. Use the northern access. Don't wait for transport trucks. Move on foot if you have to. And keep your head down," she instructed, her voice calm but firm. A shadow moved across the ridge again, distant yet unmistakable. The sniper was still there, still watching. Felt a chill run down her spine. Every step, every order, every movement she made could be observed, calculated, and exploited. Her orderly world of spreadsheets and manifests had turned into a chessboard where the enemy could checkmate at will. She moved outside the command post, kneeling behind the sandbags, scanning the perimeter with binoculars. Smoke curled from the eastern outpost, where soldiers had fallen under precise gunfire. The enemy's movements were methodical, almost surgical. They weren't just attacking, they were shaping the battlefield, anticipating every response. Sergeant Torres, one of the senior officers, approached her, sweat glistening on his brow. His voice was low, urgent. "We're stretched thin. The perimeter won't hold if they push hard. We need reinforcements now or we're done." His jaw tightened. She had no reinforcements. Every unit outside the valley was either engaged elsewhere or hours away. She swallowed the rising panic and forced herself to think. The solution wasn't brute force. It was strategy, coordination, and precision. If she failed, hundreds would die. She ran through the options: deploy snipers of their own, reroute supplies to reinforce weak points, lure the enemy into kill zones. Every plan had flaws, every decision carried risk. She realized something stark. For the first time, she wasn't just a logistics officer. She was a commander, a protector of lives she had never expected to lead in battle. The first mortars landed just beyond the eastern fence. Explosions erupted like firecrackers on steroids, sending dirt, shrapnel, and panic into the air. Soldiers ducked, scrambled, and fired back blindly, but the enemy remained elusive. One sniper shot rang out in the distance, and a soldier fell motionless. Stomach churned. The threat wasn't just nearby, it was inside their minds now, a phantom that could strike without warning. In the command post, coordinated the countermeasures with surgical precision. Supply crates were rerouted to the weakest points, medics moved under cover, and the radio buzzed with frantic updates. She could feel the fear radiating through her team, yet she had to mask her own panic, because hesitation now meant death. And then, from the ridge, a shadow flickered again, sharper this time, closer than before. Froze, recognizing the unmistakable posture of a sniper, patient, disciplined, ready. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She realized in that instant, they weren't just under siege, they were being hunted. Every decision, every movement could be their last. And somewhere up on that ridge, the sniper waited silently for the perfect moment to strike. The night air was thick with smoke and tension, the kind that clung to the skin and made every breath feel sharp and deliberate. Hadn't slept in over 24 hours. Her mind was a storm of calculations, checklists, and worst-case scenarios. The valley below the ridge was a chaos of gunfire and shattered supply lines, and the sniper, still unseen, loomed over everything like a silent phantom. Then a shadow appeared. At first, she thought it was another enemy scout, a mirage in the dim glow of flares. But as the figure approached the perimeter, noticed something different. This person moved with absolute control, every step deliberate, unhurried, aware. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite the tension clawing at her chest. The figure stopped a few meters from the fence. He was older, wiry, with a weathered face that spoke of decades in the field. His eyes, steel gray and unreadable, met hers. "Sergeant Hayes," he said calmly. "Retired sniper, heard about the siege. I can end this, but you have to trust me." His heart skipped. Trust a stranger? In the middle of a siege? Her mind screamed caution. She had managed logistics, not life-and-death missions in enemy territory. And yet, something about him, his calm, the way he scanned the valley like he had done this hundreds of times, made her hesitate. We don't have time for strangers," she said, her voice clipped. "Time, exactly why I'm here," Hayes replied, gesturing toward the distant ridge. "There's one sniper out there. One shot, one chance. I can take it, but you need to give me access to the command feed. I need intel, wind data, angles. I don't ask twice." Weighed the risk. A retired sniper with unknown motives versus an enemy who had already killed soldiers with surgical precision. She swallowed her fear. "Fine, you get access. But if this goes wrong, I take full responsibility." Hayes nodded once, as if acknowledging a pact forged in silence. He moved like a shadow, disappearing into the darkness, leaving to manage the command post with renewed urgency. The valley seemed to hold its breath. Every sound, the distant rattle of gunfire, the hum of drones, the sharp metallic snap of a bullet hitting a crate, echoed louder now, more precise, more terrifying. Coordinated supply lines, medics, and ammunition, while mentally calculating where the sniper might strike next. Hours dragged on. Hayes' presence was felt rather than seen. Occasionally, he would appear at the edge of her vision, adjusting a scope, whispering something technical about wind direction, bullet drop, and the exact angle required for a 1,200-meter shot. Barely understood the numbers, but she understood the implication. One shot, one chance. Private approached her again, pale and trembling. "Captain, he's actually going to do it. That sniper." Didn't answer immediately. She had learned the hard way that hope was dangerous. It made soldiers careless. But she allowed herself a fleeting thought. Maybe, just maybe, this stranger could turn the tide. From the ridge, the distant shape of a sniper scope glinted faintly in the moonlight. Stomach clenched. She could almost feel the predator's patience. The way Hayes was reading the enemy's movements, anticipating their chaos, calculating the exact moment to strike. Realized something profound in that moment. Leadership wasn't about control anymore. It was about trust, about letting someone else carry a part of the weight, even when everything inside you screamed not to. And yet, as she looked back at the valley, the distant shadows, and the soldiers scrambling below, one thought pressed into her mind like ice. The enemy was still out there, unseen, and they knew every movement. Hayes could strike, but what if he didn't make it? And if he failed, would anyone survive? The night deepened, stretching endlessly over the valley. Checked her maps, adjusted supply routes, and prepared for the inevitable, the clash that could decide life or death. Somewhere in the darkness, a retired sniper was poised, silent, calculating, and had only one choice: trust him or watch everything unravel. Suspense hook could rely on a stranger whose past was shrouded in mystery, and would the sniper strike before the enemy struck them? All the night air was thick with smoke and tension, the kind that clung to the skin and made every breath feel sharp and deliberate. Hadn't slept in over 24 hours. Her mind was a storm of calculations, checklists, and worst-case scenarios. The valley below the ridge was a chaos of gunfire and shattered supply lines, and the sniper, still unseen, loomed over everything like a silent phantom. Then a shadow appeared. At first, she thought it was another enemy scout, a mirage in the dim glow of flares. But as the figure approached the perimeter, noticed something different. This person moved with absolute control, every step deliberate, unhurried, aware. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite the tension clawing at her chest. The figure stopped a few meters from the fence. He was older, wiry, with a weathered face that spoke of decades in the field. His eyes, steel gray and unreadable, met hers. "Sergeant Hayes," he said calmly. "Retired sniper, heard about the siege. I can end this, but you have to trust me." His heart skipped. Trust a stranger? In the middle of a siege? Her mind screamed caution. She had managed logistics, not life-and-death missions in enemy territory. And yet, something about him, His calm, the way he scanned the valley like he had done this hundreds of times, made her hesitate. We don't have time for strangers, she said, her voice clipped. Time, exactly why I'm here, Hayes replied, gesturing toward the distant ridge. There's one sniper out there. One shot, one chance. I can take it, but you need to give me access to the command feed. I need intel, wind data, angles. I don't ask twice. Weighed the risk. A retired sniper with unknown motives versus an enemy who had already killed soldiers with surgical precision. She swallowed her fear. Fine, you get access. But if this goes wrong, I take full responsibility. Hayes nodded once, as if acknowledging a pact forged in silence. He moved like a shadow, disappearing into the darkness, leaving to manage the command post with renewed urgency. The valley seemed to hold its breath. Every sound, the distant rattle of gunfire, the hum of drones, the sharp metallic snap of a bullet hitting a crate, echoed louder now, more precise, more terrifying. Coordinated supply lines, medics, and ammunition, while mentally calculating where the sniper might strike next. Hours dragged on. Hayes' presence was felt rather than seen. Occasionally, he would appear at the edge of her vision, adjusting a scope, whispering something technical about wind direction, bullet drop, and the exact angle required for a 1,200-meter shot. Barely understood the numbers, but she understood the implication. One shot, one chance. Private approached her again, pale and trembling. Captain, he's actually going to do it. That sniper. Didn't answer immediately. She had learned the hard way that hope was dangerous. It made soldiers careless. But she allowed herself a fleeting thought. Maybe, just maybe, this stranger could turn the tide. From the ridge, the distant shape of a sniper scope glinted faintly in the moonlight. Stomach clenched. She could almost feel the predator's patience. The way Hayes was reading the enemy's movements, anticipating their chaos, calculating the exact moment to strike. Realized something profound in that moment. Leadership wasn't about control anymore. It was about trust, about letting someone else carry a part of the weight, even when everything inside you screamed not to. And yet, as she looked back at the valley, the distant shadows, and the soldiers scrambling below, one thought pressed into her mind like ice. The enemy was still out there, unseen, and they knew every movement. Hayes could strike, but what if he didn't make it? And if he failed, would anyone survive? Night deepened, stretching endlessly over the valley. Checked her maps, adjusted supply routes, and prepared for the inevitable, the clash that could decide life or death. Somewhere in the darkness, a retired sniper was poised, silent, calculating, and had only one choice: trust him or watch everything unravel. The valley was swallowed in a tense, moonlit stillness that felt heavier than the chaos of the day. Sat hunched over the maps on the command table, her hands shaking despite her attempts to steady them. Every crate, every soldier, every supply route ran through her mind like a high-stakes equation. The enemy's movements were deliberate, unpredictable, and terrifyingly patient. And somewhere atop the ridge, Hayes, a stranger, a retired sniper, was calculating a shot that could decide everything. Hayes' voice came from the doorway, quiet, precise. She barely noticed him until he stepped closer, rifle cradled like an extension of his body. Wind, speed, distance, elevation. You're looking at 1,200 meters. One shot, one chance. Blinked at the figure, the cold edge of fear slicing through her. She wasn't trained for this. Her battlefield had been supply chains, manifests, and not the heartbeat-stopping calculus of life and death. And yet, here they were. Her orders would dictate whether hundreds lived or died. She rose, packing along the command post. The night was quiet, almost oppressively so, broken only by the distant rattle of gunfire and the soft hum of the generators. "And if you miss?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her attempt at calm. Hayes' eyes didn't waver. "Then we adapt, but we don't get a second shot at this. One bullet, one target, make it count." Swallowed hard. Every scenario flashed in her mind. Wounded soldiers trapped under fire, supply trucks destroyed, medics pinned down. And at the center of it all was one sniper who could end the siege or fail spectacularly. She realized the weight of command in a way that no checklist could ever prepare her for. "Prepare the observation points," she ordered, snapping herself back into her role. I want eyes on every perimeter, every approach, every weak point. Coordinate with Hayes. We're running this like a war game, but this is real. Private appeared, carrying additional binoculars. His hands trembled as he handed them over. Captain, he's really going to do it. Yes, said, her voice firmer than she felt, and every one of us is counting on it. Hours stretched on, each second grinding the nerves. Hayes vanished into the shadows, his movements a silent dance across the rocky ridges. Watched monitors, maps, and radio channels, constantly recalculating supply lines, casualty routes, and escape paths. She had to be everywhere at once, thinking 10 moves ahead, while knowing that a single mistake could annihilate everything she had worked for. Then the first glint appeared, a tiny flash from the ridge, almost invisible under the moonlight. Hayes was in position. Held her breath, imagining the bullet's path, calculating the impossible distance. 1,200 meters through wind, elevation, and gravity to a single, precise target. The tension in the command post was suffocating. Soldiers whispered prayers, checked their weapons, and waited, knowing that the outcome rested on a single shot fired silently in the night. Could feel the weight of every life in that room pressing down on her shoulders. And then, in the darkest moment, a thought slashed through her mind like a knife. What if the enemy sees him first? What if he's not just precise, but also vulnerable? She turned to Hayes' position on the screen, a tiny dot in the darkness. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the map. She realized that leadership was more than giving orders. It was about trust, faith, and accepting the terrifying reality that sometimes the right decision was to let someone else bear the burden. The night held its breath with her. Every soldier, every crate, every heartbeat seemed suspended in a fragile balance. And somewhere atop the ridge, Hayes adjusted his scope, whispered calculations under his breath, and waited for the perfect moment. The night was a frozen breath in the valley, the kind of silence that made every heartbeat loud, every distant noise sharp enough to slice through the nerves. Crouched behind the reinforced sandbags of the command post, staring at the ridge with eyes wide, unblinking. Somewhere out there, 1,200 meters away, Hayes, the retired sniper who had appeared like a ghost from nowhere, was poised, waiting for the perfect moment. She felt the tension in her chest like a weight pressing down on her lungs. Soldiers moved quietly around her, their faces pale in the moonlight, eyes flicking toward the distant ridge whenever the wind carried a hint of movement. The entire base was holding its breath. Then it happened. A single flash of reflected light, almost imperceptible, caught her eye. The whisper of the sniper's exhale, the click of the scope adjusting, and then the shot. The bullet screamed through the night, a thin, invisible line cutting across the valley. Stomach dropped. Time seemed to stretch and warp. The sound didn't reach her immediately. All she could hear was the blood rushing in her ears, the faint groan of a generator, the distant shuffle of soldiers. Then a soldier at the eastern outpost went down, motionless. The enemy officer commanding the forward units had been struck with surgical precision. Exhaled sharply, a mix of relief, awe, and fear coursing through her veins. But the victory was fragile. The enemy didn't panic, they adapted. Chaos rippled through their ranks, but it was controlled chaos. They began adjusting their positions, retreating into cover, probing for the hidden sniper. Her mind raced. The shot had bought them time, but it hadn't ended the threat. Soldiers began scrambling, repositioning, checking the perimeter. Supply trucks, previously stalled under enemy fire, moved cautiously now, escorted by armed units. Medics tended to the wounded, whispering reassurances while adrenaline fueled every movement. "It worked," whispered Ostruck, eyes wide. "Yes," she replied, but the word tasted hollow. She felt the weight of the lives still in danger pressing down. "But don't get comfortable. He's still out there, and so are they. One shot doesn't mean it's over." From the ridge, a faint silhouette disappeared into the darkness. Hayes had fired, and now he vanished like a shadow, leaving only questions in his wake. Realized that the sniper was not just a solution. He was a wild card, unpredictable and untouchable. And then came the subtle sounds, the shift of movement barely audible above the chaos. Stomach clenched. The enemy was regrouping. They were hunting now, not attacking blindly, not panicking. The sniper had delayed them, but the threat remained. She barked orders, rallying her officers, rerouting supplies, fortifying weak points. Every crate of ammunition, every bandage, every soldier became a piece of a larger strategy. She had orchestrated logistics in theory for years, but tonight it was life and death in practice. Yet even as she coordinated, a gnawing thought crept into her mind. Hayes had fired one shot, but what if he missed the next one? What if the enemy found him? Could a single man, even one as skilled as this ghost sniper, hold back the tide long enough for them all to survive? Glanced at the ridge again. It looked empty in the pale moonlight, but she knew better. Someone was still there, waiting, watching, and every second that passed without another shot felt like the calm before another storm. The base had survived the first strike, but knew instinctively that the battle had only just begun. Somewhere in the darkness, the sniper had changed the rules of the game, but the enemy was relentless, and the valley was still a powder keg. Dawn was bleeding into the valley, pale light spilling over shattered sandbags and smoke-streaked trenches. For a moment, it looked almost peaceful, but knew better. Victory here was fragile, like a candle flickering in a hurricane. The sniper's shot had delayed the enemy, but survival required more than a single bullet. Her eyes darted across the command post monitors. Supply trucks were moving again, medics were attending the wounded, and soldiers were regrouping. Relief should have been the dominant emotion, but it was. Felt it creeping first as a whisper, then as a gnawing ache. Something was wrong. It started with the communications feed. Static hissed, cutting in and out. Frowned, reaching for the console. The feed displayed telemetry from the supply crates. Every crate was supposed to be accounted for, every location monitored. And yet, one crate showed movement it shouldn't have. Coordinates shifted inexplicably, as if someone inside was sending updates to the enemy. Her stomach dropped. Betrayal. It was the one thing she had hoped would never touch this valley. "What is it?" asked, peering over her shoulder. His voice trembled. He knew instinctively that she had found something serious. Didn't answer immediately. She traced the feed back, piece by piece, and her pulse quickened. The signs were subtle, misplaced crates, unexplained deviations from standard routes, but they all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Someone inside was feeding the enemy critical information. She called an immediate security briefing. Her officers gathered in the cramped, smoke-stained command post, faces pale, eyes wary. "We have a traitor in our midst," said, voice cold and precise. "Someone has been sending our coordinates, our movements, to the enemy. We cannot trust anyone until we find them." Gasps echoed across the room. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Suspicion spread like wildfire. Who could it be? Someone new, someone long trusted. Sergeant Torres spoke up, voice low and strained. "Captain, this could explain how the enemy knew exactly where to strike. Every ambush, every sniper movement, it wasn't random." Nodded grimly. "Yes, and we cannot waste another second. We split into search teams. Every crate, every soldier, every station will be examined. Whoever is behind this will be found." Even as orders were barked, felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. Soldiers she had worked alongside for months, trusted implicitly, could be the source of death now, and revealing the traitor too late could cost lives in minutes. Hours passed as teams scoured the base. Suspicion grew with every step, every glance, every hushed conversation. Soldiers began watching each other, subtle mistrust crackling in the air like static electricity. Moved silently among them, commanding authority but internally questioning everyone she had once relied upon. And then, finally, the evidence emerged, a hidden tracker inside one of the supply crates. Someone had deliberately tampered with it, feeding real-time coordinates to the enemy. The betrayal was not just a tactical failure, it was personal. Felt a bitter sting of anger and disbelief. Someone had chosen profit, ideology, or revenge over the lives of everyone in the valley. She confronted the suspected officer, heart pounding, his face twisted with fear, guilt, and defiance. I had no choice," he stammered, but knew better. Choice had been taken from no one here. He had made a conscious decision. and that decision had endangered every soldier, every life under her command. The betrayal cut deeper than any sniper's bullet. It reminded her, coldly, that the enemy was not always outside. Sometimes, the real danger came from within. His jaw tightened. She realized she had to act decisively. Lives depended not just on strategy or firepower anymore, but on swift judgment and courage. The first light of dawn barely cut through the haze of smoke and dust hanging over the valley, moved like a shadow among her soldiers, adrenaline sharpening every sense. The traitor's identity had been confirmed, a communications officer she had trusted for months. And now the reality hit her. Betrayal inside the base, enemy forces regrouping outside, and a retired sniper somewhere in the darkness poised to fire again. The valley was a pressure cooker ready to explode. Sergeant Torres hissed, pulling her toward the eastern approach. "They're pushing through the northern ridge. We have to stop them before they breach the fence. Supplies and medics won't survive a direct hit." Nodded, scanning the map in her mind. Every option was a gamble. Every decision, a potential death sentence. She drew a deep breath and barked orders to her officers, dividing squads into defensive positions, rerouting supply lines, and designating extraction points for the wounded. Every step, every movement had to be precise. Meanwhile, Hayes, silent, unseen, lethal, was already on the ridge, his rifle leveled, eyes scanning the enemy's regrouping formations. Caught a fleeting glimpse of him through the binoculars, a ghost in the gray dawn, calm, calculating. She had come to rely on him in ways she never thought possible. The first shot had bought them precious time, but the enemy was relentless, adapting faster than any plan she could make. As the traitor scrambled to sabotage another communications hub, sprinted toward him, heart pounding. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice slicing through the haze. The officer froze, hands shaking, sweat streaking his face. "You don't understand," he began, but she cut him off with a glare so sharp it could pierce steel. "I understand perfectly," said, jaw tight. "You made a choice that could have killed everyone here, and now you're going to fix it or face the consequences." The officer hesitated, eyes darting toward the ridge. Hayes' silhouette was barely visible now, blending into the shadows like a predator. Knew what was coming. He would fire again if the enemy exposed themselves, but they couldn't risk a direct line of sight to the sniper. The valley erupted. Enemy soldiers surged through the northern ridge, desperate, determined. Mortars screamed overhead, sending sandbags and debris flying. Moved alongside her squad, firing, shouting, guiding, every second a razor edge of tension. She could hear Hayes whisper calculations into the wind from 1,000 meters away, and then a sharp crack. Another enemy officer went down. Chaos rippled through the attackers, but they didn't retreat entirely. They adapted, moving through cover, probing for weaknesses. Realized this would be a battle of patience, nerve, and instinct. Meanwhile, the traitor fumbled with a communications panel, trying to alert the enemy again. His patience snapped. She lunged, slamming him against the wall of the bunker. "This is your last chance. Now!" she shouted. His hands shook as he nodded, scrambling to disable the compromised signals. Through the haze, saw her soldiers rallying, forming a fragile line against the advancing enemy. Hayes' presence was invisible yet omnipotent, the calm ghost holding the line with a single, precise rifle. His heart raced. Every order she gave, every maneuver she orchestrated, depended on trust, courage, and timing, and one misstep could mean disaster. As the enemy began another push, felt a fleeting surge of hope. Her soldiers, inspired by her leadership and Hayes' deadly precision, were holding. Every shot fired, every barricade manned, every crate protected felt like a victory. But the battle was far from over. She glanced again toward the ridge, where Hayes' rifle was poised, finger resting lightly on the trigger. The ghost sniper was ready for another shot, and she knew it might be the difference between life and death. The valley was silent. Not the quiet of peace, but the heavy, trembling kind that comes after a storm. Smoke curled from scorched bunkers, dust settled over shattered sandbags, and the groans of the wounded punctuated the eerie calm. Captain stood amid the chaos, knees weak, heart pounding, staring at the ridge where Hayes had vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. Her hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, the fear, and the countless decisions that had weighed on her over the past 24 hours. Soldiers moved around her, exhausted but alive, faces streaked with soot and sweat. Some embraced, some wept, some stared blankly into space, haunted by what they had seen. His gaze drifted to the command post. The traitor had been detained, disarmed, and now sat silently in a corner, face pale, hands bound. Had delivered justice swiftly, but it felt hollow. One human life had betrayed many, yet the cost of survival weighed heavier on her. Every fallen soldier, every bullet fired, every life preserved or lost passed through her mind like a relentless. And then she thought of Hayes, the ghost sniper who had turned the tide. One shot had saved countless lives, but he had vanished before anyone could thank him, before anyone could even know his name. She knew he had operated alone, with precision and discipline honed over decades. And yet, the man who had appeared like a savior also carried an air of mystery, silent, untouchable, almost mythic. Moved to the edge of the ridge, surveying the valley below. The enemy forces had retreated, broken and demoralized, but the destruction was clear. Trucks overturned, bunkers collapsed, and the fields that had once been supply routes now bore the scars of battle. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the dust, the smoke, the bitter scent of survival. Private approached cautiously, glancing toward the ridge as if expecting the sniper to reappear. "Captain, we made it," he whispered, voice trembling with relief and disbelief. "Yes," said softly, voice heavy. "But at what cost?" She looked down at the valley, at the scattered soldiers, and felt the crushing weight of leadership. Victory was not sweet. It was raw, jagged, and incomplete. Her thoughts drifted back to Hayes, to the precision of the first shot that had shattered the enemy's plans. That single bullet had changed everything, had given them time, had bought lives. And now he was gone, an invisible protector, a phantom in the mountains. As the base began to rebuild, issued quiet orders, ensuring the wounded were cared for, the supplies restored, and the perimeter secured. She moved among her soldiers, nodding, offering words of encouragement, yet inside she felt hollow. The battle was over, but the shadows lingered. Somewhere in the mountains, the sniper remained a ghost. Knew that she would never forget him, the way he had appeared, struck with deadly precision, and disappeared without a trace. She wondered who he truly was, why he had risked himself for them, and whether she would ever see him again. The valley was silent now, but the echoes of the siege remained in every heartbeat, every memory, every scar. Stood on the ridge long after the soldiers had moved on, staring at the horizon as the sun began to rise. For the first time, she allowed herself a long exhale, a release of fear, tension, and grief. Yet the question lingered in her mind, sharp and unyielding. Who was he really, and would she ever see him again? The siege had ended, but the story of survival, courage, and the mysterious sniper was far from over. In the silence of the valley, realized one truth. Some battles are fought in bullets and chaos, but some are fought in trust, sacrifice, and the ghosts that linger long after the fight is done. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the scars, the heroes, and the quiet legend of the sniper who had changed everything in one perfect, silent shot.